a lot of these places gave us 15% off. So not only was there exquisite yarn that was tempting us, 15% off. How do you argue with that? So they were selling skeins of their pure alpaca yarn, which was just so soft. They were $25 a skein, and we're getting 15% off. So for 3 skeins, which would have been $75, we got for $66. I ummed and ahed. I'd already decided I don't need any more yarn. I've already bought enough. I don't need any more. But I'm looking at this alpaca thinking, oh, this is just gorgeous. And I have had some pure alpaca before, but this was just gorgeous. And it was pure. Oh, that was the selling point. He said it's pure colour. They don't dye it in any way. It's not treated in any way. So it hasn't got chemicals and all that sort of thing in it. Unlike sheep fleece, there's no lanolin, so it doesn't need all that treatment to get all the lanolin, that one, out. So it's pure. This is pure stuff you're getting. So of course we had to have some, and they had it in the different shades of the different types of animals it had come from. So there was a really rich brown, and then a slightly lighter shaded brown, and then a light cream. So Linda bought one of each, and I bought one of each, and they'd had some shawls there knitted in this yarn, which of course helped sell it because the shawls were gorgeous. And they said they needed 4 skeins for those, and they were very long. So we decided 3 skeins was enough. That would give us a nice length shawl. So I had ideas that I was going to start knitting it from the dark brown up to the medium and then to the cream. And Linda said she didn't like that idea. She started knitting it another way. Of course, she had to start knitting it while we were on board, didn't she? So she started knitting it and got about that far and thought, no, she didn't like what she was doing, so undid it again. And when she got home, she found a pattern she really liked, and so started knitting it. And when she bought it on Friday, yesterday, I could see she wasn't going to have enough yarn to complete it to the length that she needed it. So I was very generous. I sold her my yarn. That's why I haven't got it to show you, because I sold it to her. Because you know that when you buy things that you're tempted with, and it's all in the moment and everything else, and then you get home and think, I did not need to buy that yarn. I may never knit that yarn. So when I could see that Linda really needed that yarn, well, what could I do but to offer to sell it to my friend? So I did. So she's got it, and she'll have a really lovely long scarf, shawl, whatever it is that she's doing. It's just a very straight one, but she's doing, excuse me, tried hard to ignore that one. She's doing 2x2 rib in moss. So 2x2 this way, 2x2 that way. You get the idea. A little bit like a basket weave, but very small. And it's looking gorgeous. So I've redeemed some of my money, and she's gained a bit more yarn, which I thought worked out well. All right, so we tendered back to the ship, and off we went again. Right, so then we ended up in Picton. Now, just prior to telling you about Picton, we'd been talking on the ship to one of the girls. Her name is Jordan. She's an African-American, beautiful woman. And I don't know how the conversation came about, but something to do with how people hate doing purl. And she was saying how she loved to do purl because she did it Portuguese style. And we all said, oh, what's that? Now, I had seen Portuguese style before. I had seen one of the other podcasters get all excited about it and get her pin, and she was going to go on with this Portuguese knitting, but I never saw any more of it after that. And I'd looked at it as well because, as you know, I love to learn new things. But at the time, I think I was so busy doing something else, I soon forgot about it. So Jordan agreed that before we went ashore to Picton that day, that we'd sit upstairs and she would teach us how to do Portuguese knitting. Now, if you're not familiar with Portuguese knitting, what you need is a pin that attaches to your clothing. So there's a story around this pin, but I can't tell you the story around it until I've shown you what's needed. So let me just put the pin on for the moment. And if you don't like putting pins in your clothing, then this might not be for you. Okay, so the idea of Portuguese knitting is that you can see I've started a project because I believe that when you start to learn a new project, when you start to learn a new process of doing something, you should make a project so that you stick to doing that process the whole way through. By the end of the project, you've learned how to do it and you're proficient at it. So that was my idea, and this was some of the yarn that was given to me at Ashford. So this is Ashford 4-ply yarn. Very, very pretty colours. Not the softest yarn I've ever tried, but on socks I'm sure it's fine. This is going to be a cowl, so don't know what that's going to be like when it's finished, but anyway, that was a bit about what's on my needles while I'm teaching you this new task. Okay, so you've got your knitting. You clip the yarn. Now this is a slow process because I haven't made it foolproof yet, but anyway, get the idea. You clip the yarn onto the clip so that it's being tensioned. Now I don't know how I'm going to show you this. I need to get up a bit higher so you can see. So you hold the yarn from the ball here. It's going through the hook there and coming down to your knitting here. And then the yarn, instead of yes, I'm holding that in my hand the way I would normal throwing knitting, but that's only for tensioning. I'm not going to be using this for throwing. So all I'm doing is holding that yarn there and tensioning it in my hand. The work is done by my thumb. So, for instance, if I was going to do, let me see if I can turn around this way and show you. Can you see that? I go into the needle there, into the stitch there. I flick the yarn, and I'm not doing this well, so don't see that this is being as hard as it is. I flick the yarn, bring the stitch through, and that's a purl stitch. Don't know if you saw that properly. I'll try it again here. You put the yarn, you put the needle into the stitch, you flick the yarn, and then bring the stitch off. Okay, enough of a lesson. If you want to find out about Portuguese knitting, and it's called other things as well, it's not just Portuguese knitting, there's lots of videos. So go to YouTube and look up Portuguese knitting, and you'll find lots and lots of videos to teach you how to do it. And honestly, it's fascinating. And truly, doing purl is the easiest thing on earth. And I was watching Lucy Neatby's Craftsy class on it. And was it Lucy Neatby? No. Sorry, it wasn't Lucy Neatby. It was, my goodness, I've forgotten the name of the person who taught that class. Anyway, whoever it was, she was doing it without looking. And she said, I'm not showing off here, I'm just showing you how easy it is to manipulate this yarn and these stitches without looking. So I tried it and I could. Straight away, I could do the purl stitch without looking. The knit stitch is slightly more difficult, and doing rib is slightly more difficult. Certainly not as easy as continental, but still a lot easier than throwing. And if you've got trouble with your arm when you're a thrower, if you have trouble with your muscles, certainly a fantastic way to learn how to do a different style of knitting and save all those muscles. So you could do, if you worked out your tension properly, you could do purl on all your projects, you could do Portuguese on all your purl rows, and you could do throwing or whatever on your knit rows. Typically, a lot of Portuguese stuff is done in the round, and so when you're knitting something in the round, you're just knitting it inside out. You're purling it. Purl, 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 purl. It's inside out, and the whole thing is done in stocking stitch without any difficulty at all. So, highly recommend learning it. So, Jordan taught Linda and me how to do Portuguese knitting. Then we said, let's go ashore and have some lunch and see what's there, because there was nothing planned for that particular stop. So we went ashore. Goodness, all this new terminology I had to learn. We went ashore and there was markets on. So we thought, that's nice, we can go down and see what the local produce is. So we wandered around the markets and lo and behold, we came across a young woman who was selling these little pins. So she had a whole variety of different things, and there was only a few of these pins, but what was exciting about them was that there's all these little knitting things on it. So I've got a little ball and needles and a little pair of scissors, and this says Knitting Queen, this is a spinning wheel, this is another queen. I don't know why I've got another queen on there, I didn't need it. And then this is the little clasp that I had the bright idea that if we had that connected to, because at first when we saw these, not only did we love them for the knickknacks, but we thought, okay, so we can pin these onto ourselves, we can loop the yarn through there, and then that will act as our Portuguese pin. But then I thought, if we had this little clip at the end, then the yarn could clip in there and the pin can just stay there snuggle without being unpicked and going through your clothing all the time. So she made up 3 for us. Jordan got one, Linda got one, and I got one. And it was really thrilling because several times after that, Linda would look at it and say, this is the best thing I've bought on the whole cruise. She loved it, so I was pleased for her. Okay, so we found that. So we spent a lot of time at this woman's stall getting all of these trinkets and a couple of other things that I bought from her that I was interested in, and I think I'll be doing more business with her in terms of my Etsy store for my resin jewellery, my stitch markers. So hopefully in the future something like that will happen. Alright, so that was Picton. We had lunch in a very awful restaurant, and then we went back to the ship. And the interesting thing, I'll put this in here, we had no time. There was no time. You were either all day in a workshop or you were all day wandering around on a tour that they'd planned for you, or seeing a town that you'd arrived in. There was really no time to enjoy the ship. It was like, you know, yes, we're on the ship when we're doing our workshops, but apart from looking out this glorious window at the ocean, you were sitting in a classroom doing a lesson. So, you know, you're getting up early to get to the workshop. You're getting up early to race off to this next tour that we're doing. And I think Picton was the first chance we had of just relaxing, of just saying, we're going to stay on the ship, we're going to just relax and enjoy this ship. So we did. We went back upstairs and we sat down with our knitting and we just knit all afternoon. And then what was happening every night is that the whole group of 41, well, not all 41 gathered together every night, but every night a lot of us gathered together upstairs in what they call the crow's nest, and we knit. And we just sat there and knit for hours. It was very difficult because the lighting was really poor, and at certain times of the night they would then turn the lights down lower, which we had to constantly complain about, but we sat up there and knit. So that's what we did that night as well. We just had a beautiful time enjoying being on the ship and just looking out at the ocean and that sort of thing. Alright, so from Picton we then sailed to Wellington, and there it was organised that we're going to go to 2 different places. The factory there is Zeilana, and they make the most exquisite possum yarn. It is exquisite and it is expensive. Just a tiny little ball was something like $45. Needless to say, I didn't buy any. I said I wasn't going to. They were having bets that I would, and I didn't buy a thing all day except my lunch. So anyway, we went to the factory first. We split up into 2, so half of us went to the factory, half of us went to another shop called Holland Road Yarn Company, and they sell Zeilana yarn. So we were thinking we're going to buy it at the factory, but no, they don't sell it there. You have to come to the shop to buy it. So we went off first to have a look at the factory, and that was fascinating. Going through a massive factory that produces the yarn right from the fleece that comes in, that gets all meshed together. Possum fleece can't be, what are we talking about? Can't be dealt with, spun. Thank you. Can't be spun on its own because it's too short. The fibres are too short. So it has to be spun with something else. So they take a long process to mix it all up and to have it all intermingled with the other really gorgeous yarns that they use, like cashmere and pure merino and all that sort of thing. And so there was this massive, huge, big room, probably the size of this room, full of all of this mashed up stuff, and he encouraged the girls to go in and jump in the yarn. So they're all jumping in, and you couldn't see them for the yarn and everything, so came out covered in it. But anyway, so yeah, we saw that, we saw this, the dyeing processes, the spinning process, the massive number of machines that are needed for spinning all of this stuff. It's just unbelievable what goes on within a factory for producing yarn. Just fascinating. Didn't like the smell of it at all. Couldn't cope. There was I think I've missed a factory that we went to, because we went to one before this one, so I've missed one. But the smell is awful. You just feel like you've got the fibres flowing around in the air the whole time. And then when we went into the drying section after the dyeing, it was frightful. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. And I'm sure my nose was absolutely blocked with wool fibres. It was just terrible. I couldn't work in a place like that, and I don't know how they all do it. But interestingly, in each of these factories, the people who work there have worked there for many years, 15, 20, 30 years. Their family works there together. So it's obviously an industry that they're all happy in, but I couldn't work in it. It wouldn't work for me. So we went there, we saw that, and then we got swapped over, and the others who had done all the shopping, they went to see the factory and vice versa. So yes, everybody else did some huge damage in that shop and nearly bought it out. So that was interesting. Excuse me again. Oh, okay, so I'm not used to talking for this long. I hope I can finish this in the hour. I don't want to make A, B and C. Alright, so then we left there and we went to Napier. And Napier, we were going again to see another factory, which was the Skeins factory. Not like Skane that we have in Australia in Coffs Harbour, but Skeins with a Z. And that's another New Zealand factory that produces yarn. That one was a much smaller one, but still the same story, that everyone had been working there for many years, and you know, the owners were really friendly. It was actually on Good Friday, and they opened the place especially so we could go in and see it. So that was really excellent. But they got some profit out of it, because that was our last official shopping day. And not only did they give us 15% off, but they also gave us free postage over $100. Now you can imagine, particularly the Americans and the Canadians were starting to think, how are we going to pack all this stuff in our bags to go home? Because most of them were flying home. It's all right when you're on a cruise, you can have a number of bags, but not when you're flying. So they took advantage of the, if you buy $100 worth, you get it posted home free, and they bought up big. So I tell you what, this place made a lot of money out of us that day. But it was excellent. Really enjoyed it. I had a promise again that I wasn't going to buy anything, and I looked at some yarn and thought, I really want to buy that, and I ummed and I ahed, and I went from looking at a sweater's worth down to looking at a shawl's worth, and in the end I put it back and left it there. So I was very pleased with myself. Okay, so after that, the next day that we had was not an organised tour day. It was at Tauranga. I know I'm saying that wrong, but the only way I can remember the word is to remember our zoo in Sydney, which is Tauranga Zoo. So I'm saying Tauranga to remember it, but I'm sure that's not how you say it. Anyway, didn't particularly like it. Now that could be because both Linda and I developed colds by the time we docked at Tauranga. We were feeling quite sick. We'd had a pretty bad night, and lots of the group and people on the ship had been very, very sick all through the cruise, and we'd managed to avoid it right up until the night before we docked there. And so we were feeling quite sick, full up with a cold and just feeling sick. And coughing. Linda was coughing really badly. So we only went out, we went ashore just long enough to find a pharmacy, to buy some more medication, to have a coffee, to connect to the internet. And all the other destinations we'd been to had free Wi-Fi. Some if you bought coffee, others if you just sat in their vicinity. But in Tauranga, nobody. Most places didn't have it at all. And we found one coffee shop that said, oh yeah, we've got Wi-Fi if you buy a coffee. So we got 50 meg for the coffee. That disappeared by the time I downloaded 2 emails. And then I had to get another coffee if I wanted more, which I didn't do. So no, we didn't get any internet access there properly. So we went back to the ship, and I don't know if I mentioned on my podcast before we went, but my vision of a cruise, this is the only vision I could picture in my mind and anticipate, was sitting out on the deck in this gorgeous sun lounge, knitting in the sun, while the captain walks past saying hello to everybody. Now, I watched too much Love Boat when I was a kid, so yes, that's where it came from. But that was my dream, and Linda kept telling me, you won't get it, Joyce, because it's so windy out on deck that it will blow you away. So I said, let's go up on the deck, and let's just sit down and relax. So we did. We went up. There was nobody there because they were all ashore. And we sat down on a deck chair, and I got my knitting out, and Linda took a photo of me. So I finally got my dream, and it was not blowing at all. And the fact is, this was a miracle cruise because it was not rough once. Now, we had just heard horror stories from people, 2 different cruises that had gone just before us. One had been headed towards Vanuatu right at the time that Cyclone Pam was hitting. And so the seas were so bad that the captain had to pull the ship into Hobart, and that's where they stayed for their entire cruise. You can imagine, not a lot of people were very happy about that. My friend was, because that's where the best yarn store was, but nobody else was happy. So it was horrific. I mean, I can't remember now the size of the waves. I want to say she said they were 25-foot waves, but that sounds outrageous. So maybe they were 5-foot waves, but even so, no, maybe they were more than that. I don't know. They were huge waves, and everyone was sick, and they couldn't take the ship any further. And then the cruise just after that also had horrific seas where everyone was really sick all the time. Ours was as smooth as you could get. There was not a single day where there was a sense of high seas. I did take a photo one day only where there were these little ripples in the way, and there was actually white caps over the top. But still, the ship was as smooth as anything. So I was so thankful because it was a miracle cruise. It was the best cruise anyone could ever have. So I didn't get sick, didn't need all the medication I bought in case I got sick. So anyone who's going on a cruise, let me know. I got lots of medication. And every day was just perfect. You know, occasionally you'd feel the ship move, particularly when we're walking down the corridor and we go, wee! But nothing like what I have heard and seen on videos. So it was just absolutely blessed in every way possible. There were a couple of other things I wanted to say, so I've got to say them quickly now. One of the girls was knitting a shawl or a scarf, probably more to the point, while we were knitting together. And Linda and I both loved it, so I asked her about it. And this one is called Knit Night, Knit, N-I-G-H-T, Knit Night. It's on Ravelry. It's, I don't know, £3, £3.50, something like that. The simplest thing you could ever knit. If you thought that the Hitchhiker was easy, this one is easier. So quick. I finished this on the cruise. So, very easy. I did this out of the yarn that I had bought somewhere along the way and finished it and love it. Can't wait till we get some cold weather so that I can start to wear it and enjoy it. There's lots of different ways that you can knit it, and since we got back, Linda's has knitted another one again and totally put her own design in the midst of it. So I'm trying to encourage her now to produce the pattern because it's beautiful. The other thing, that we did, we had a cruise coordinator who was Chris Bilsma, and Chris is also very well known throughout the world and is one of the cruise coordinators that is often on these craft cruises. And Chris had designed a pattern specifically for our cruise, calling it Down Under Cowl. So it could be done either as a scarf or a cowl, and it will be for sale. I'm not sure if she's put it up yet for sale, but I'm sure it will be eventually. And so I had specifically taken yarn with me to do this because I knew we were going to get the pattern. So this is pure silk that I bought at Bendigo last year. You can't see the colour properly, but it's a really beautiful mauve. And so she designed 4 different patterns. One was a little bit like a basket weave, but it's aimed at representing the mountains in New Zealand. This one is for boomerangs, so you can't see it properly, but it looks like boomerangs. That's the only downside about this yarn. It's not showing the stitches really clearly. It's sort of all blending into itself. This is basket weave to represent the baskets that are made by native people. And then the last one is a leaf pattern that I've just started to do, but I haven't gone very far, and needless to say, haven't done any more on it since I got home. And there's a reason for that, but you won't know what the reason is until you watch my normal podcast, which I'm about to record when I finish this one. So then I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. Oh no, not about that, about why I haven't done any more about that. So just to finish off, the one thing I wanted to tell you about Jordan, she gave me a gift of these, they're called Round the Block, and they are blocking wires that she has designed herself. So I told her I'd advertise her on my podcast. So if you're interested, she's called Handcrafted in S.E. Wisconsin. I'll put her her address up here when I edit this, and then you'll be able to see her address. So I told her I'd tell you about her blocking wires. They're very thin, they're very flexible, and they're called Round the Block, which I think is an excellent name. Not sure what she charges for them. She's got a nice colour coding system to tell you the size of the length of the wires. So that's my my plug for Jordan. And she was a beautiful woman, and we loved everybody that we met on the cruise. We loved them all, and we're hoping to keep in contact with them through Ravelry and maybe see them on a cruise. So many of them had cruised so many times. I can't believe how many times these people have cruised, and this was my first. So yeah, hopefully it's not my last, and hopefully you've enjoyed my little story about my cruise. I didn't want to go on forever, and hopefully if you didn't want to listen to it, you've turned off a long time ago, and if you're still listening, it's because you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for listening and watching, and yes, I'll see you in a minute in my proper podcast. So remember, she'll be right, mate. Bye.